Alex had always considered Ryan's family a second home. They had been best friends since high school, their bond built on years of late-night gaming sessions, road trips, and unfiltered conversations. Yet, despite the countless hours spent at Ryan's house, Alex had never really gotten to know Mr. Carter beyond polite greetings and brief exchanges. To him, Ryan's father was an enigma, distant but polite, a man whose presence commanded quiet authority without demanding it. So when Ryan called one Saturday morning, asking for a favor, Alex didn't hesitate. "My dad needs help moving some furniture while I'm out of town," Ryan explained. "It'll just be an hour or two. You'd really be saving him a headache." Alex agreed, expecting nothing more than an easy task and perhaps an awkward silence or two. But the moment he stepped into the Carter household, he sensed something different. Mr. Carter greeted him at the door, dressed casually in a fitted black t-shirt and jeans. It was the first time Alex had seen him outside of a suit, and the contrast was striking. There was a certain weight in his expression, a quiet weariness that made him look older than his years. "Thanks for coming, Alex. I appreciate it," Mr. Carter said, offering a firm handshake. His grip was strong, but his tone carried a trace of something softer. Relief, maybe even gratitude. "No problem," Alex replied, stepping inside. The house was eerily quiet. No background hum of a television, no distant sound of conversation, just stillness. They got to work quickly, lifting a heavy oak bookshelf from one side of the living room to the other. Despite Mr. Carter's composed exterior, Alex noticed the way his muscles tensed, the occasional sharp breath he took when shifting his weight. "You all right?" Alex asked, setting his side down carefully. Mr. Carter exhaled, rolling his shoulder. "Just not as young as I used to be." There was a small chuckle, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. For a moment, they simply stood there, the dim afternoon light casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. "Ryan mentioned you've been busier than usual," Alex said, filling the silence. Mr. Carter nodded. "Work's been consuming, and home isn't exactly a place to unwind these days." There was something unsaid in his words, something Alex wasn't sure if he should acknowledge. But before he could decide, Mr. Carter changed the subject. "Let's take a break. You want something to drink?" Alex followed him into the kitchen, watching as Mr. Carter poured 2 glasses of water. There was something unexpectedly personal about the moment. Just the two of them, the weight of silence growing heavier with each passing second. As Alex reached for his glass, their hands brushed, a fleeting touch that neither of them acknowledged but both felt. And for the first time, Alex saw something in Mr. Carter's eyes that unsettled him. Something vulnerable, something searching, something that felt dangerously close to a connection. The encounter lingered in Alex's mind long after he left the Carter house. He told himself it was nothing, a fleeting moment, an overactive imagination. But as the days passed, he couldn't shake the way Mr. Carter had looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. Then, one evening, a message appeared on his phone. "Mr. Carter, I owe you dinner for your help the other day. Tomorrow night?" Alex hesitated. It was harmless, wasn't it? Just a simple meal. Polite thank you. But something about the invitation felt different. Not forced, not obligatory, intentional. The following night, Alex arrived at the Carter house, finding Mr. Carter in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, focused on slicing vegetables with precision. The scent of garlic and herbs filled the air, creating an unexpectedly intimate atmosphere. "Didn't take you for a cook?" Alex said, leaning against the counter. Mr. Carter smirked. "I don't do it often, but sometimes it helps clear my mind." There was something about his voice, lower, more measured. Alex watched as he moved around the kitchen, the ease in his posture betraying the weight he carried beneath it. They ate in the dining room, candlelight flickering against the polished wood. The conversation started light, work, travel, harmless anecdotes. But as the evening stretched on, the walls between them began to lower. "I know Ryan talks about his mom a lot," Mr. Carter said, swirling the wine in his glass. "But he never really mentions us, our marriage." Alex didn't know how to respond, so he said nothing, allowing the silence to coax out what Mr. Carter seemed on the verge of saying. "It's been broken for years," he admitted, a quiet confession that carried the weight of years of discontent. "We stay together for convenience, for appearances. But if I'm honest, I don't know who I am outside of it anymore." The words struck something deep in Alex, something unspoken within himself. He had always admired Mr. Carter from a distance, his quiet strength, his composed exterior. But tonight, he wasn't the untouchable businessman. He was just a man, stripped of pretense, searching for something real. "You ever feel like you're living a life that doesn't quite fit?" Mr. Carter asked, his gaze steady. Alex's throat tightened. The answer was yes, but he wasn't sure he was ready to say it out loud. Instead, he nodded, and for a moment, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. Their eyes met across the table, and in that unspoken space, something shifted. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was recognition. Alex didn't know where this was headed. But he knew one thing: this was no longer just a harmless dinner. The shift between them was undeniable. What had started as a quiet understanding now pulsed beneath every interaction, unspoken yet impossible to ignore. Alex told himself it was nothing, just a strange, fleeting attraction, a trick of circumstance. But when Mr. Carter called him again, a week after their dinner, the hesitation in his voice made it clear. He felt it too. "Storm's bad tonight," he said over the phone. "Power's out. You're welcome to wait it out here if you don't want to drive in this mess." Alex knew he should say no, but he didn't. When he arrived, the house was cast in flickering candlelight, shadows stretching along the walls. Mr. Carter had changed into something casual, a soft sweater and jeans, but there was a tension in his shoulders and awareness in the way he moved. "I was just making tea," he said, leading Alex to the living room. "Hope that's all right." Alex nodded, sitting on the couch as Mr. Carter handed him a steaming mug. The rain pounded against the windows, and for a while, they sat in companionable silence, the dim glow of the candles making everything feel strangely out of time. Then Mr. Carter exhaled, setting his mug down. "I need to be honest with you." Alex's pulse quickened. "Okay. This past year, I felt lost." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "And I think you've noticed. Hell, maybe you've even felt it too." Alex swallowed hard, unsure where this was going. No, he knew, but he didn't know if he was ready to hear it. "I tried to ignore it," Mr. Carter continued, his voice lower now, more careful. "Tried to pretend that what's happening between us isn't real. But it is." A sharp crack of thunder rattled the windows, but Alex barely noticed. He had spent so much time avoiding his own feelings, convincing himself that what he sensed between them was imagined. But sitting here, in the stillness of the storm, it was impossible to deny. His gaze flickered to Mr. Carter's, and in that instant, something broke. A wall, a boundary, an unspoken rule neither of them had dared to name. The distance between them disappeared. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't reckless. Just the quiet, inevitable pull of something that had been building for too long. Mr. Carter reached out first, his fingers grazing Alex's wrist, hesitant but deliberate. And Alex didn't pull away. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. No storm, no consequences, just this. Then, just as suddenly, Mr. Carter exhaled sharply and pulled back, running a hand through his hair. This is a mistake." The words landed between them like a stone, heavy and irreversible. Alex didn't know whether to agree or to protest. All he knew was that, mistake or not, there was no going back now. The silence after Mr. Carter's words was suffocating. The warmth of his touch still lingered on Alex's skin, but the air between them had changed, thick with guilt, uncertainty, and something dangerously close to regret. Alex swallowed hard, his heart hammering. Mr. Carter stood abruptly, running a hand over his face. "This was a mistake," he repeated, but his voice was less certain now, as if he were trying to convince himself as much as Alex. Alex clenched his fists. He wanted to say something, anything, but what was there to say? That he didn't regret it? That he'd felt more seen in these past few weeks than he had in years? That no matter how wrong it was, it still felt real? But none of those words would change the reality they were facing. "I should go," Alex finally muttered, rising from the couch. Mr. Carter didn't stop him. He only nodded, expression unreadable, as Alex grabbed his jacket and stepped out into the rain. The days that followed were agonizing. Mr. Carter's name sat heavy in Alex's phone, a message unsent, a call unmade. He avoided Ryan, too, afraid that somehow his friend would see the guilt written all over him. He kept replaying that night in his head, the moment Mr. Carter had reached for him, the way their breath had mingled in the candlelight, the way he had pulled away as if it had all been a terrible miscalculation. But was it? One evening, a knock at Alex's door shattered his spiral of thoughts. He opened it to find Mr. Carter standing there, his usual composure frayed at the edges. "I needed to see you," he said simply. Alex stepped aside, letting him in. The air between them was heavy, unspoken words pressing down like a weight neither could escape. "I don't know how to make sense of this," Mr. Carter admitted, rubbing his temples. "But I do know that ignoring it doesn't make it go away." Alex exhaled sharply. "Then what do we do?" Mr. Carter met his gaze, something raw flickering behind his eyes. "We stop, before this turns into something we can't take back." The words hurt more than Alex expected. But he knew Mr. Carter was right. This wasn't just about them. It was about Ryan. About a marriage, even if it was already falling apart. About consequences neither of them were ready to face. Alex nodded slowly. "Okay." A long silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Mr. Carter gave him a small, sad smile. "For what it's worth, it wasn't a mistake." And just like that, he was gone. Alex sat in the quiet, heart aching with the weight of what could have been. Some stories aren't meant to last forever, he realized. But that doesn't mean they don't change you.